In this video, I'm going to go over the overall procedure and the theory behind hinges. I have these Blum Blue Motion 110 degrees full overlay soft close hinge that I got from Woodcraft with some instructions. I don't have the real cabinets yet, so I'm going to use scrap wood and assume that this is the edge of the cabinet of my frameless cabinet. One thing to remember is I'm going to be using these European style hinges, and these are meant to be used with European style cabinets, which in other words is frameless cabinets. In the US, the face frame cabinets have been more popular, so the face frame sort of goes on to hide the edge of the cabinet, the edge of the plywood. It goes all the way around. But I think more and more people are moving towards frameless cabinet, where this goes away and it's a simple box, more elegant looking, and it's more easier to build, and it's also more spacious overall. So I'm going to be using this edge to show the rest of the installation of the door, and this edge is similar to the edge of this mock cabinet, so to speak. So when I was researching and when I went to buy the hinges, it was pretty confusing. There were many different types of hinges. So I'm going to go over a short summary or crash course on how I selected the hinges. The first classification was face frame versus frameless. I already knew I was making frameless cabinets, so I needed to buy frameless hinges, which are different than face frame hinges. Once I got that, I looked into the angles of the door. That means how much the door will open. The one I got was 110 degrees. There are probably less or more degrees out there based on the need, but for kitchen cabinets, 110 degrees I thought was best. Once I got that, then I had to decide whether I wanted an inset door versus an overlay door. Inset door basically goes in like this within the cabinet, and the overlay door is on top of the edge of the cabinet. And I knew I wanted an overlay door. Once I knew I needed an overlay hinge, then I needed to know how much overlay. So there's full overlay like this, or there's half overlay like this. So there's different extents of overlay that can be done. So what I wanted was full overlay door, but I also wanted to see if I can keep maybe 2/16 or 1/8 of an inch distance from the edge of the cabinet, so that my next cabinet, the adjacent cabinet, will also have a door that is 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the cabinet. So 1/8 on this side and 1/8 on the other side, the other cabinet. The door-to-door distance is 1/4 of an inch. That's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm trying to get. Most European hinges, even if they're different brands, they come pretty standard. They're in two pieces like this. One piece, this piece goes in a hole on the back side of the door like this, and the other piece goes on the frame of the cabinet itself. The dimensions, even if they're different brands, they still pretty much the same, although we do need to check the manual, but I've seen that it's pretty much the same. For example, the distance between these two screw holes is usually 45 millimeters, and the diameter of the hole required, or the cup required, is usually 35 millimeters, and it's usually 0.5 or half an inch deep. Now, making these holes is not that easy. It has to be at the right distance from the edge of the door. It has to be the right diameter too. So it's very difficult to make it manually. So I'm going to be using my main tool, my correct concealed hinge jig, to make these holes. It looks something like this. It comes with this sort of bit. I think it's called a Forstner bit that makes the hole for me. It also has these two holes over here to make my corresponding standard 45 millimeter hole, so I can drill the screws in. Now there are three main adjustments here. The first one is the distance from the edge of the door, which can be adjusted just very simply like this. And you can see I made three sample holes, 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter, and 5 millimeter. You can see the 5 millimeter is further away from the edge of the door than 3. So I'm going to be using this 3 millimeter setting in my door. The other adjustment is the depth of the hole, which is pretty standard. Like I said, 0.5 inches. And this is an adjustable sort of stopper that goes up and down, and I push it all the way down. That gives me standard 0.5 inches of drilling capacity, or the drilling depth, and that's what I need. The last adjustment are these measurements over here that start with 0 at the center of the circle all the way to the edge. So I'm going to be marking and making sure that I know where I start when I drill my hole. I'll probably start at 3 inches from the edge of the door. That way I know my hole, the center of my hole is exactly 3 inches from the top of my door. And that's going to help me later on to put this bit in on the frame of the cabinet itself. I'll explain that later. So I finished the door part of the hinge here. The next step is to put in the cabinet frame part of the hinge. Interestingly, I found very little video help or YouTube help on as to how to put on this part of the hinge, the part that goes on the frame itself. There's a lot of help available and even tools available to put this cup, this part in. With, for example, I use the correct jig to drill the holes and align this part in. So I'm going to go over next step by step as to how to put the cabinet frame part of the hinge. Now, one critical thing to remember is when I put these door part of the hinges in, the center of this circle was exactly 3 inches from the top of the door. That's the measurement that we have to go with. Now, the positioning of the cabinet frame part of the hinge, we know it needs to align, but it will depend upon how we desire the door to be, the positioning of the door itself. So in some designs, the door is flush with the top edge of the cabinet like this. In some other designs, like my design especially, the door is 1/4 of an inch below the top edge of the cabinet. So that difference is what will dictate the positioning of the cabinet frame itself. So if the door is flush with the top side, the top edge of the cabinet, then we can measure this 3 inches below from the top edge all the way over here. That's my line over here. But if the door is designed to be 1/4 of an inch below the top edge of the cabinet, then we have to give an extra 1/4 of an inch and push it down, so to speak, to expose 1/4 of an inch on the top. So in my case, I'm going to keep it simple for now and keep it 3 inches. So for the purpose of this video, I will keep the distance of this part of the hinge to be 3 inches from the top edge of the cabinet, assuming that I want the door to be flush with the top edge of the cabinet. Now the door part of the hinge is going to be aligned with the cabinet frame part of the hinge, something like this. Now I already explained that the cabinet frame part of the hinge needs to be 3 inches from the top. So I marked a line from the top edge of the cabinet 3 inches down, and I transferred it to the inside wall of the cabinet. Now, come to think about it, next time I might mark this line before I assemble the cabinet, because it might be easier since I already would know the positioning of the cabinet doors. Now, the way I can align this is by using this arrow and the hole in between. So the arrow is pointing towards the door, and the hole, you can see the line behind the hole, is going to help me go up and down and align with that 3-inch mark. The next question would be, how far should this hinge part be from the edge of the cabinet? And that will be depending upon the instruction. So the instruction tells me that it needs to be 37 millimeter from the edge of the cabinet. Now 1.5 inches is actually 38.1 millimeter. It's not exactly 37, close, but to be specific, 37 millimeter is 1 and 14/32 of an inch. And it's difficult to mark that, but these kind of tools like this Incra T rule, which has markings up to 64th of an inch, becomes very handy. So I'm going to use this to mark 1 and 14/32 of an inch across vertically to find the positioning of my screws. And I'm going to do that by putting this on its face first, or on the side, to do the drilling. So I use my T rule to mark this 1 inch and 14/32 of an inch line on both sides, over here and over here. And I already aligned the cabinet frame part of the hinge to this. The line over here should be in the middle of these two circles, and it's a little difficult to see, but that arrow mark and the hole right here is aligned with the 3-inch mark right here. So here's my finished door hinge installation finally. These hinges come with these kind of snap covers that go on top, just snap on, just to cover the ugly parts, so to speak, just like this. You can see this is a soft close, so as soon as I try to close it and leave it, it's gonna close it by itself softly. You can also see a nice consistent gap from top to bottom. Same thing over here, consistent gap from top to bottom. The cool thing about these kind of hinges is that it's pretty adjustable. That means these 3 screws, one over here, one over here, and one over here, can adjust the door whichever way of the 3 ways possible. So it can go up and down, it can go sideways, and it can also go back and forth. So if there is any slight errors, they can always be corrected with these kind of adjustments. So here's my closing thoughts and observations based on the whole build. First, this hinge is supposed to be full overlay. That means technically the door should completely be flush with the edge of the cabinet. I can see here it's not exactly flush. Even though I moved the door and adjusted to go as much to the right as possible, it's not flush. This can be easily remedied by using the cup distance from the edge of the door that we set on the Craig jig or any kind of jig. I set it to 3 millimeters. If I move it to 4 or 5, I can easily make the door flush with the edge of the cabinet. In my case, I don't want it to be flush. I want 1/8 of a distance. So I do need to move the door to the left as much as possible. And I can do that by adjusting easily one of the 3 adjustments that we talked about. So I'm moving the door towards me, to the left, so to speak. Now, when I check, I have a good distance from the edge of the cabinet, 1/8 of a distance. So now this is exactly what I want, because 1/8 of a distance from here and the 1/8 of a distance for the next door gives me 1/4 of an inch distance that I want between the doors. The second observation has to do with how I put the hinges, the door cabinet frame part of the hinges. So I measured 3 inches, like I said before, from the top edge, and I screwed in this hinge. But I did not measure 3 inches from the bottom and screwed the other hinge in. That way, if I screw both the cabinet frame part of the hinges from the bottom, there raises possibilities of errors where I may find out that my door hinge is not exactly aligned with both. Instead, what I did is I put the hinge in, screwed this one in, and attached the door. Of course, this part of the hinge is sort of flying and not attached. But once I attach this, I screw the bottom one in wherever it falls from the door, so I don't have to really measure from the bottom. As long as I just make sure that it's aligned with the 1 and 14/32 of the line that I drew over here. The third observation and the last one has to do with these drawers. A lot of cabinets have drawers in the behind the cabinet door, and if I put a drawer here, I can see that it's hitting the cabinet door, so I wouldn't be able to open any drawer. So in cases where there is drawer slides behind the door, cabinet doors using this hinge, I have to move the drawer slide away from the cabinet wall by about half an inch, and I would recommend using solid wood cut on table saw to get exactly half an inch, and not plywood, because plywood is is never really half an inch that we would want, and that would ultimately translate into adjustments in the width of the drawer itself too. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.